I still remember the exact sound the microphone made when she pulled it away from me. That sharp little pop, like a period at the end of a sentence, like a door being slammed in my face in front of 400 people. I was 16 years old, standing on a stage in a dress my mother had ironed 3 times the night before, and in the span of about 30 seconds, everything I had worked for, 2 years of work, was taken out of my hands and handed to someone else. And the worst part, nobody came after me. Not one person followed me off that stage. I walked back to my seat alone, and I sat there for the rest of that ceremony with my hands folded in my lap, staring straight ahead, while the room moved on like I had never existed. That was the moment I almost stopped. Almost. If you are new here, welcome. My name is Celeste. And I have never told this story out loud before. Not the full version, not the part about my brother, and definitely not the part about what happened the day that woman walked back into my life without even knowing who I was. So if you have ever had something stolen from you, your confidence, your opportunity, your moment, I need you to stay with me for the next 20 minutes, because this story is for you. Subscribe if you haven't already, turn on your notifications, and don't go anywhere. Trust me on that. I grew up in a small town, the kind of town where everybody knows your family's business before you do, where the grocery store has one aisle for everything, and where the idea of making it feels like something that happens to people on television, not people like us. My parents worked hard. My father was on his feet 12 hours a day doing warehouse work. My mother cleaned office buildings at night and came home smelling like lemon bleach and tired. We were not poor in the way people dramatize poverty. We were just tight. Every dollar had a job. There was no extra. I was the quiet one in school. Not shy, quiet. There is a difference. I watched everything. I noticed everything. And from the time I was about 12 years old, I was obsessed with fashion. Not the celebrity kind, not the magazine kind, the real kind. The way fabric moves. The way a well-made garment can make a woman stand differently. The way clothing tells a story before a person ever opens their mouth. I used to fill sketchbooks with designs, whole collections, from scratch, in ballpoint pen on notebook paper. When I was 14, my home economics teacher, one of the few people who actually paid attention to me, told me about a regional scholarship. It was for young women pursuing creative and business disciplines, fashion design qualified. The essay portion was substantial. The submission required a full portfolio, and the award, $3,000 and a formal recognition ceremony, was considered a big deal in our county. I spent 2 years on that application. 2 years. I redesigned my portfolio 4 times. I rewrote the essay 11 times. I know it was 11 because I kept every draft in a folder under my bed. My mother helped me print the final submission at the library because our printer was broken. She paid for the color copies herself, out of her own pocket, without me asking. The morning of the ceremony, she ironed my dress while I ate breakfast. She didn't make a big speech about it. She just ironed it carefully, hung it on the door, and said, "You earned this." That was all. Just, "You earned this." The ceremony was held in the school auditorium. There were maybe 400 people there. Students, parents, teachers, school board members. It felt enormous to me. My hands were sweating. When they called my name, I stood up and walked to the stage, and I genuinely thought, this is the beginning of something. And then Mrs. Hargrove stepped forward. She was on the school board, a woman in her late 50s, silver hair, a voice that carried without effort. She stepped to the microphone before I could even reach the podium, and she said, and I remember every single word. She said, Before we proceed, the committee has reason to believe that the winning submission in the creative category may not represent the original work of the applicant. The room went quiet. I stood there on that stage, and I did not understand what was happening. I looked out at the audience, and I saw my mother's face change. I saw her sit up straighter, and I felt something cold move through my entire body. Mrs. Hargrove never said my name again after that. She didn't have to. I was the only one standing on that stage. She talked about the integrity of the process and the committee's responsibility to the other applicants, and all I kept thinking was, I wrote every single word. I drew every single sketch. There is a folder under my bed with 11 drafts that proves it. But I didn't say that. I was 16. I was on a stage, and 400 people were looking at me. The trophy went to the girl who came in second. I walked back to my seat. No teacher stopped me. No one from the committee followed up. My mother met me in the hallway after, and she held both my hands, and her eyes were wet, and she said, I know you didn't do anything wrong. But that was the thing. Knowing didn't change what had just happened in front of everyone. By Monday, the whole school was calling me a cheater. The months after that ceremony were the quietest of my life. And I don't mean peaceful quiet. I mean the kind of quiet where you stop talking because it doesn't feel like your words matter anymore. I stopped sketching. I stopped looking at fabric. I put my sketchbooks in the closet and I didn't open them. The thing people don't tell you about public humiliation is that it doesn't just hurt in the moment. It rewires something in you. It makes you distrust your own instincts. It makes you wonder if maybe they were right. Even when you know that they weren't. School became something I endured, not something I attended. I moved through the hallways like I was trying to take up as little space as possible. Some kids were cruel about it openly. Most were just indifferent, which was somehow worse. I had always been invisible to a certain crowd, but now I felt like the wrong kind of visible, seen for something that wasn't true. I graduated. Barely cared. Applied to one community college nearby because it was the only thing that felt possible. Got in. Sat with the acceptance letter for 2 weeks before I could decide if I even wanted to go. The night before registration, I went through my closet and I pulled out every sketchbook I owned, all 7 of them. I stood over the trash can in my room and I dropped them in, one by one. I told myself I was cleaning up. I told myself I was being practical. But what I was really doing was giving up. Quietly, privately, without even admitting it to myself. And then my brother found them. Deshaun was 14 when this happened, 2 years younger than me, which meant he was still in middle school during the ceremony, still figuring out who he was, still at that age where everything feels like a performance. He didn't come to the scholarship event. He was at practice because Deshaun was an athlete, a genuinely gifted one. The kind of gifted that coaches talk about in hallways, the kind that gets noticed. He had been invited to participate in a regional athletic development program that year. It was the kind of opportunity that doesn't come twice in a small town like ours. Coaches, training, exposure. The real kind. Our father told me about it once, years later, like it was a fact he had been carrying around too long. I didn't know any of that at the time. What I knew was that the morning after I threw away my sketchbooks, I woke up and they were on my desk, all 7 of them, stacked neatly. No note, no speech. He had gone through the trash in my room, taken every single one of them out, and put them back where they belonged. I sat on the edge of my bed and I stared at them for a long time. Deshaun never brought it up. He came into my room that afternoon. asked if I wanted the last of the rice from the pot downstairs, and that was it. No dramatic moment. No, I believe in you speech. Just, here are your sketchbooks. Here is some rice. I see you. But I found out the full truth about 4 years later from our cousin Renee, who had a way of telling you things you weren't sure you were ready to hear. Deshawn had turned down the athletic program. He told the coaches he wasn't interested. And then he got a part-time job at a print shop 3 evenings a week and every other Saturday. He was 14 years old, working at a print shop and saving money. Not for shoes, not for anything he wanted. He was saving it for me. He paid for my first semester of supplies, the sketchbooks, the drafting materials, the fabric samples I needed for my coursework. He handed me an envelope of cash before my first day and said it was from a little side thing he had going. I believed him because I didn't have a reason not to. I found out the truth 2 years after that, about the program, about what he gave up. I called him immediately, and I was crying before he even picked up the phone, and he said, "And this is Deshawn, this is exactly how he talks." He said, "Celeste, stop. I didn't give up anything. I just changed what I was building toward." And then he said the sentence that has lived inside me every single day since. "You're not a cheater. You're the smartest person I know. And one day, everybody's going to know it too." He said it like it was the most obvious thing in the world, like he couldn't believe I needed to hear it. That is the thing about people who truly believe in you. They don't make it feel like charity. They make it feel like fact. I enrolled. I studied fashion, merchandising, and business management simultaneously because I had made a decision somewhere between those sketchbooks on my desk and that envelope of cash. I was not going to do this halfway. If I was going to rebuild, I was going to build something that couldn't be taken from me on a stage. I worked nights at a fabric store. It paid almost nothing, but I could touch fabric all day, and nobody thought that was strange. I started making pieces on the side. Small things at first, alterations, a blouse here, a skirt there. At 19, a neighbor asked me to make her dress for her daughter's wedding. I charged her barely enough to cover materials. She wore it to that wedding, and 2 women asked her where she got it. She gave them my number. That was my first real moment, not a ceremony, not an award, just a phone ringing. At 21, I set up a small stall at a local artisan market on weekends. Most people walked past without stopping. Some people stopped, touched the fabric, said nice things, and kept walking. A few bought something. I kept showing up every single Saturday regardless, because I had decided that consistency was going to be my loudest argument. I approached boutiques about wholesale. I got turned down more times than I can count. One buyer, I will never forget him, looked at my collection and said it had a very urban feel, and then moved on to the next person without another word. I drove home that day with my samples in the back seat, and I sat in my parking lot for 20 minutes, just breathing. And then I went upstairs, and I started sketching the next collection. I saved for 3 years and rented a studio space. A real one, small, nothing special, but mine. I put a table in it, a dress form, a good mirror, and a sign on the door with my name on it. That sign cost me $40. I stared at it for 10 minutes before I went inside. By the time I was 26, I had signed a distribution deal with a small luxury buyer who had seen my work at a regional fashion showcase. It almost fell apart twice. Once over contract terms, once because I got sick and almost missed a critical deadline. I pushed through both times on about 4 hours of sleep and sheer refusal to stop. Deshawn, who was working a steady job by then, sent me $200 every month. Every month. He never announced it. It just arrived. At 28, Celeste and Company was stocked in 4 high-end boutiques across 2 states. My name was on labels that were hanging in stores that, not too long before, wouldn't return my calls. I opened my flagship store at 31. I designed the interior myself, with help. But the vision was mine. I knew exactly what I wanted it to feel like. I wanted it to feel like dignity, like the opposite of everything I had felt on that stage at 16. I wanted a woman to walk through my door and feel, before a single person said a word to her, that she belonged there, that she was expected, that her presence was the whole point. We employed 40 people at opening. More than half of them were from my hometown. Some of them had applied elsewhere and been turned away. I hired them on purpose. Not out of pity, because I knew what it felt like to be dismissed, and I refused to build something that made other people feel that way. I established one company policy above everything else, written into our staff handbook from day one. No one who walks through this door is ever made to feel small. Not by a price tag, not by a look, not by a word. Everyone gets the same warmth. Everyone. That policy is not a marketing strategy. It is personal. It came directly out of what was done to me. I built it into the foundation on purpose, the way you build something into a structure so it can never be removed without the whole thing coming down. I started a scholarship fund that same year. I named it after Deshawn. Not because he asked me to. He didn't. He actually argued against it. But because I needed the world to know that behind every person who builds something, there is usually someone else who quietly made it possible. The scholarship supports young people who want to pursue more than one dream at the same time, athletes who want to design, artists who want to run businesses, kids who are told to pick one thing when they have always known they were made for more. I was standing behind the counter on a Tuesday afternoon, a regular Tuesday, nothing special about it. When she walked in, I recognized her immediately. You don't forget a face like that. The silver hair, the way she held herself. Mrs. Hargrove. Older now, slower in her movement, but unmistakable. She came in looking for a dress for her granddaughter's graduation ceremony. She had no idea who I was. I helped her. I walked the floor with her. I pulled pieces I thought would work, asked about the granddaughter's style, talked about fit and colour, and occasion the same way I do with every client who comes through. I was warm, I was professional, I was genuinely present. At one point, she stopped and looked around the store and said, "This place is something else. The owner must be a remarkable woman." I smiled, and I said, "She's been through a few things." And that was it. She bought the dress. I wrapped it carefully. I told her the granddaughter was going to look beautiful. Mrs. Hargrove thanked me, said she would be back, and walked out of my store. I stood at the window and watched her go, and I waited for the anger. I had spent so many years carrying a version of that day inside me, the stage, the microphone, the sound it made when she pulled it away, and I thought that seeing her would bring all of it rushing back. I thought I would want her to know. I thought I would need her to see me. But standing there at that window, watching her walk down the street with a bag that had my name on it, I felt something I was not prepared for. Peace, not satisfaction, not victory, just peace. The quiet, settled kind that comes when you realize that you have already won, not over anyone else, but over every version of yourself that almost gave up. I didn't need her to know who I was. I already knew. Deshawn already knew. 40 employees and a scholarship fund and a flagship store and 11 draft essays in a folder that proved I never cheated. All of that already knew. She was always going to walk back into my life, not knowing my name. That was always how this was going to end. Not with confrontation. Not with a scene. Just a woman buying a dress and walking out into the afternoon, and me standing at the window feeling something close to free. If you are somewhere in the middle of your own stage moment right now, if someone has taken the microphone from you, if you have been called something you are not, if you have thrown your sketchbooks in the trash and not yet had someone put them back on your desk, I want you to hear this. The person who believed in me didn't give a speech. He didn't organize a movement. He just took 7 sketchbooks out of a trash can and put them where they belonged. Sometimes that is all it takes. One person, one quiet act, one sentence spoken like it is the most obvious truth in the world. And if you don't have that person yet, let this be that for you today. You are not what they called you on that stage. You are not the moment they tried to end you with. You are the 11 drafts under the bed. You are the sign on the door that cost $40. You are every Saturday at the market when nobody stopped, and you showed up anyway. Don't stop. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe if you haven't, because I have more stories like this one. Stories about people who were counted out and built something extraordinary anyway. And leave me a comment below. Tell me, what is one moment when someone believed in you when you couldn't believe in yourself? I read every single one.